Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Ola Atamanov, and it's my pleasure to welcome you at Ukraine Media Center today. So, our next briefing will be dedicated to the situation in our borders, and joining us in the studio is Andrii Demchenko, spokesman of the State Bodyguard Service of Ukraine, with whom we are going to discuss this issue. Good afternoon, Mr. Andrii. Good afternoon, Olga. So let's start our conversation with the regions of Ukraine that border on the aggressor. What is the situation over there? What is the situation in Sumy region? We've heard the statements by the armed forces of Ukraine that we switch to counteroffensive in those territories. So what's really going on? Well, it's probably not so much only about Sumy region, but it also covers Kharkiv and Chernihiv regions, because basically, first of all, it's about shellings of those territories, numerous shellings that we document every single day. And those attacks by the enemy, they don't only inflict damage on the positions of Ukrainian troops, they target the settlements as well. The enemy uses cannon artillery, drones, mortars. This year there is a huge increase in use of drones, even comparing to the same period of the last year or even beginning of this year. And in Kharkiv and Sumy region, the enemy uses a lot of aviation, non-guided air missiles, guided aviation bombs, and we see the number of shellings growing in Chernihiv region as well. This year we've documented quite intense activities of enemy aviation targeting Chernihiv region, but the most of shellings are inflicted on Kharkiv and Sumy region. Well, talking about Sumy region, specifically those sections where the units of State Bodyguard Service fulfill their combat tasks. Well, first of all, I have to mention that the length of the border in the territory of Sumy region is about 550 kilometers, quite a long distance, more than in case of Kharkiv or Chernihiv regions. But again, even in that small distance, even that the enemy tries to inflict as much damage as possible in Khotinivska community, for example, in coordination with the units of the armed forces of Ukraine, the units of the State Bodyguard Service impede the enemy from further offensive in the depth of the territory of our country. In our turn, we also use drones and cannon artillery to destroy the enemy. And let me add that the enemy doesn't use material in that area, only the small infantry groups that the enemy sends to our territory with the task to advance into the depth of our territory, but they bear losses, a lot of killed servicemen of the enemy, only in the sections covered by the State Bodyguard Service units. Obviously, the other units of the security and defense forces also inflict a lot of damage on the enemy, and the enemy cannot achieve any tangible results. And what you've just said, the statements made by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the units of the Armed Forces of Ukraine switch to counteroffensive in those areas, liberating the territories of Ukraine. So even despite the fact that the enemy keeps a lot of their forces and capabilities in front of Sumy region, thanks to the heroism and bravery of Ukrainian warriors, the enemy still cannot achieve the tasks set by their command in Sumy region, fortunately. A couple of statements from the latest study by the Institute for Study of War. They said that the enemy brings more reserves to Sumy region in response to the situation unfolding there, and that there are certain advances of the enemy in Oleksiivka and to the southwest from Yunakivka. Well, the evaluation of all of the activities unfolded along the forward edge of the battle area in Sumy and Kharkiv region included can only be done by the general staff who have clear assessment of the and understanding of the situation in the forward edge of the battle area, because again, when it comes to the areas where the State Border Guard Service units are located, there were no advances of the enemy observed whatsoever within the latest periods, let alone the activity of their infantry groups was decreased thanks to the fact that the enemy bears significant losses, and without having sufficient reserves for more intense offensive, throwing more meat in the assaults, the enemy has to withdraw. Well, we see that now the number of shellings has increased again when it comes to infrastructure and the civil population residing in those regions. So talking about the dynamics of the use of the guided aviation bombs, has it decreased or increased lately? Well, it's pretty intense. Again, comparing to some time ago, there is no some significant increase, but there is no decrease either. The enemy uses guided aviation bombs and non-guided aviation missiles to destroy the positions of our defenders without being able to advance using their infantry groups, without being able to engage more resources to continue offensive on the positions of the Ukrainian defenders. The enemy resorts to using aviation, not only artillery, but aviation as well, to destroy our fortifications with the more intense weapon used by aviation. So talking about the enemy sabotage teams, what is the situation in those regions with them? Well, basically the activity of the enemy reconnaissance and sabotage groups within the last couple of months significantly decreased, specifically comparing to the last year. The threat of the saboteur activity of the enemy is not going anywhere. However, when it comes to the number of identified attempts of the sabotage teams entering our territory, we can come to a conclusion that their activity is not as intense as it used to be. Obviously, if we compare three regions, Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kharkiv regions, this year, just like the year before, when the situation was the same, the majority of attempts of the sabotage groups to penetrate the border was documented in Sumy region. Also, we've documented a number of such attempts in Kharkiv and Chernihiv regions. And talking about the borders of Chernihiv, one of such activities was done with propaganda purposes, to put the tricolor flag and to pose it as some kind of victory. Within Sumy region, the activity of the enemy saboteur groups that was repelled. We may say that their activities was closer to Chernihiv region or closer to the south, to Kharkiv region, in the central section of Sumy region along the border. The activities of sabotage groups was decreased. Another important area is the border with Belarus. Let's talk about it a little bit. What's about the threat there? Let me remind for our spectators that on the 6th of August, the Minister of Defense of Belarus has stated that the first echelon with the Russian troops has arrived at Belarus for joint strategic training West 2025. Those news are definitely of concern to us. We keep track of that situation. So what is the situation for the time being? What is the number of those troops of the aggressor country that are staying in Belarus, and what is the situation in general?
Well, of course, those announcements about the first echelons of the Russian troops, of course, it brought the attention of the Ukrainian society. Everybody is expecting some kind of actions from the part of Belarus during those trainings. But we need to understand that the number of Russian forces that has arrived to Belarus, it's just a few dozens of transportation pieces, and if we compare it to the threat that could be coming to our country, we need to soberly analyze the situation and give assessment and see what could possibly happen during those joint training between Russia and Belarus. And of course, such estimations are made, and respective plans are devised. And right now we have trainings on different levels, logistical trainings, communication trainings. However, in September, when there will be the practical phase of the training on the territory of Belarus, the threat the risks to our country, of course, will rise. However, we need also estimate. We need to do estimation about what number of forces is Russian Federation capable involving or engaging on the territory of Belarus against Ukraine. As of right now, if we take our border or the border with Belarus, there were no signs of formation of a striking group, and which could pose a real threat to our country. However, this possibility is seriously considered by our country still. So we are analyzing all the information that we are receiving so that the people that are in defensive positions near the Belarus, they could react accordingly to the development on the ground. We cannot exclude any kind of provocations. We cannot. We can expect anything as usual from the Russian Federation, and our defense will be. Should be also reinforced by the engineering units, including mining fields and fortifications in the territories, regions adjacent to the border region. And we need to assess every possibility that we can put out for our defense. Yes, I understand, especially after those interviews with Putin and Lukashenko that they recorded on the bench. So regarding Lukashenko, about return of the Russian troops to Kyiv, what's your opinion on that? What Lukashenko said, it's really such a nonsense that it's quite hard to give an estimation to it, and of course it sounds like Lukashenko has forgotten to mention that they have opened their borders for Russian troops advancements, and this kind of announcements, these claims from the part of Lukashenko, we hear them not for the first time, and this is how he's trying to show that he is supporting the Russian Federation, and the fact that in 2022 22, 23, the Russian troops crossed the border so easily. He didn't mention that. And what we are seeing now, that with these announcements, Lukashenko is trying to kind of forget, to make people forget about the full-scale invasion day. Let's talk about a little bit about the borders that we have with the European Union. What is the situation there? What is the passenger flow? And we have the last month of summer right now, and we see periodically that there are some kind of queues and lines on the border passing points. Well, it's not worth thinking that those lines are there 24/7. They form during the event of during the event of increase of the passenger flow, and it depends mainly on the time of the year. That, like for example, in summer, it is always increase. Like for example, in June, the passenger flow increased by 23%. In July, the passenger flow remained quite high. It was around 17% in comparison to the June. So if we compare it to the May, it has increased by 40%. And the transportation flow stays the same. It is characterized as high even now. So it is when the season of vacation started, when the training sessions and qualification trainings has ended, they started showing a tendency to want to go to vacation, and in July the border was crossed by 4 million citizens approximately, and this is both ways, both directions. So it wasn't outstanding in any of the directions. So it was. However, right now we are seeing the overwhelming, higher flow of passengers on the into Ukraine. So when we close the statistical data for the month, we will have some updated data about the movement of Ukrainian citizens across the borders, and it will be when especially mothers with their kids will be returning to make it until the next educational year, scholar year starts, and despite the fact that the passenger flow is quite high, it's around 20,600,000 citizens. It's 5% higher than the same period last year. Despite the fact that we have war at hand and there is a curfew in place. If we're talking about the summer months, what are the violation of laws that you are facing during border crossing? The majority crimes is committed by the men older than 40 years, and this is when this category of people is trying to leave the country and stay abroad, and that's when it often happens. They are presenting either forged documents or try to pretend to be someone they're not. Commit an identity theft, and the border the border servicemen are limited, are kind of limited about leaving the country, and sometimes people are not haven't prepared. They forgot to fetch important paperwork, or left them with their relatives. So we had cases when a woman comes to a border and she doesn't have a passport, or sometimes with children, the permission paperwork is not vetted in a due manner. So we are trying to implement simplified procedures for as many of these procedures as we can. However, there are cases when the people are following some third party, and in this case they have to get a permission for the authorization for the third party to follow to accompany the children abroad. And what about the dynamics of the crimes abroad right now? Is it increasing or decreasing? Fortunately, there is no significant increase. However, there is a rise in attempts to run through the green zone of the border, and this depends on the number of the willing people who are choosing, the people who choose unlawful way of crossing the border. However, the majority of the violators, when we are applying measures of prevention to them, and in majority of cases it's kind of organized groups who promise to facilitate the crossing of the border. They promise sometimes to provide a companyman who will lead them through the border, and sometimes we see that people are paying money to these people, and these prices fluctuate from $5,000 to $13,000, and our main goal is to not get the criminals at the border, but rather uncover these criminal groups inside on the territory of Ukraine, and we are quite successful in this regard. The last case, it was 19 people, if I remember correctly, last week. Do you know the details of this case? Well, this is probably not the biggest group, because last year's we had an opportunity to detain 40 people at the same time. However, this year, yes, 19 people divided in several small groups. They were detained in the Zakarpattia region, and using the information or the facilitation of the criminal groups, they were getting to the border, and these people that were detained, they're from different oblasts, regions of Ukraine, but their goal, in the end, their goal was to run away, to leave the territory of Ukraine during the curfew, while the curfew is in effect, and this is against the law. These actions the criminals that are committing these crimes, they need to understand that they are also damaging the reputation of Ukraine, the image of Ukraine on the international arena. And these cases of unlawful crossing of the border, we are working, we are applying all resources, every resource that we can to basically prevent all kinds of unlawful crossings of the border. And the group that we were talking about just now, they were caught on by camera. There was enough time for the operator of the video system to register the group that were trying to get to the border, and the patrol was going relaxingly to the place where they detained them. For now, the responsibility for the such a crime is mostly administrative. It's a penalty payment. And also the court decides the degree of guilt of a violator. And what we're trying to focus on also is to find the organizers of these groups. In this case, yes, the investigators are working on this. Thank you for this conversation. Of course, for your service to all the forces of defense of Ukraine, and stay with us. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.